introduce you all to John Wantz, my co-founder and CEO of Every. Thanks, John.
I didn't know I was taking your mic, sorry. Hey, good morning. So I have like a quick little slot here, and Jonathan wanted me to talk about something that's been pretty important and something we've been working through on our project, but I think it's actually going to have a pretty substantial impact on kind of the industry. And that's something that's foundational to how chains are operating. And so everybody know, or anybody know, the difference between proof of work and proof of stake? Show of hands, we've kind of heard about this. So I think last time I was here, I was very forward in saying that like my blockchain knowledge, I'm still kind of like at the community college level. So I'm still at that level. So we're not going to get very technical on this, but we're pretty excited about proof of stake. And I think it's going to start to change the economics of a lot of these folks who've made a lot of money mining and a lot of how these token projects are rolling out. It's going to fundamentally change a lot of the blockchains in themselves. And it's definitely something that we're going to be moving towards and looking to deploy on specifically on our chain, which is a Seattle-based blockchain here in Seattle in 2019. So quick summary. So proof of work, we have a bunch of, I'll say random and independent miners, like today on Ethereum or the Bitcoin blockchain, who are competing via an algorithm to win the block and then win the reward to actually record the transaction. And so we all know that takes time, it takes a lot of energy. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about today, what I think is going to be really interesting, is proof of stake starts to introduce the opportunity for the nodes, the validating nodes inside of a blockchain network, to have a little bit more of a direct relationship with the entity, the agent, the consumer, the dApp that wants to start to record the transaction on chain. So I'll correlate this to what we're working on. We're working on retail, so it's something we kind of all understand. So today, we're looking to allow for brands or allow for developers to actually participate and be the nodes that would win the block and be willing to stand behind my data or my information or my transaction and actually start to write that down the chain. And the way proof of stake is working, one of the most fundamental difference is you need as a miner, as a validator, to actually be able to back the transaction from an economic standpoint. So if there's a transaction that's requiring, let's say, 5 every tokens, that validator needs to have at least 5 every tokens, because if I'm a bad actor, that validator ends up accepting my information, I screw that person over, they're on the hook for that. And so in retail, that's a lot of how brands and shoppers kind of work today. So if we commit fraudulent activity, we steal a credit card or something, that typically rolls back down to the merchant. So for us, proof of stake makes a lot of sense. With a lot of miners out there, like, you know, the big algorithm that Ethereum and our chain is looking at to roll from proof of work over to proof of stake is called Casper. It's kind of like, it's in the lead. There's a lot of folks they have like a modified version of Casper live now, but those are kind of some of the big public chain platforms that are doing something pretty material with Casper. There's some pushback around, this is a big move for the rich to get richer. So if you think about a big validating node network, if there's certain participants who, on the proof of work side, they earned a lot of tokens, or Bitcoin or ETH or something, and now if we move over to Casper, they're going to be like the preferred nodes. And so the way, one of the ways the algorithm works is that depending on how old the node is or how rich it is, that will be kind of like a preferred node in the network. However, we can start to introduce what I'll call like more social attributes between the validating node and then the dApp or the person looking to process a transaction. And so one of the things that our chain's looking to do that we really like is they have like what are called namespaces. So like today on Ethereum for proof of work and on the Bitcoin blockchain, it's just random. Like there's just global miners just competing, right? And they're just using math to do so. With proof of stake, you can start to allow, I think, for enterprises, I think you're going to hear a lot about this in 2019, proof of stake is going to make sense for enterprise, because inside of a public chain, there could be kind of like subgroups of participants who want to stand behind specific activity on the network. So there may be, so I think Airbnb, they're looking at proof of stake, right? And part of the reason, one of the things they're looking at with it is they have different global subsidiaries, right? And so they have different tax issues, they have different liabilities. So if they want to start moving towards proof of stake, they're going to need to set up kind of different nodes for Europe, for transactions in Europe and transactions for the US for accounting and liability purposes. But again, back to retail, we're thinking about using proof of stake to let a group of apparel manufacturers kind of group together and allow for the tokens that they have on hand to actually be the validating currency in the node as it pertains to people looking to purchase fashion apparel. Then we would kind of do the same for CPG and food groups. And what this is starting to do is, as I mentioned, some of those social attributes with staking is the validators can start to move away from taxing the fees. So today, the Bitcoin game is the miners colluding to organize transaction fees in network. And Ethereum, this is a constant issue with proof of work. With proof of stake, I think we're going to have a much more subtle and much more socially architected relationship between the validating nodes who are powering and driving the trustlessness and the truth inside of the network, and the consumers or the dApps or the partners. Because outside of just the transaction and maybe access to the data in the transaction and the economics that drive the transaction, these validators who have other desires besides just making fees on driving transactions on a chain can start to use the chain and economically support the chain and have a direct relationship with the participants who are trying to actually write transactions down into the chain. So I literally have like just a couple minutes left, and the proof of stake is I think going to be very material, because I had a conversation with someone super smart, and he posed a question like, what's the actual store value in ETH? As for me, it was a very hard question. There's the utility aspect of it that we can all walk through and clearly understand, and there's the optimism associated with Ethereum being a very performant chain. But if all of that ETH that the miners have earned or network participants have acquired can start to move down into them kind of waiting and staking and economically supporting the trustlessness of the platform, I think we're going to start to move towards a model with staking that's going to put a real value behind these currencies, specifically Ethereum. So I think for Ethereum and its price issues that it's had in market, I think staking is going to be materially important, because the utility of Ethereum actually facilitating the ins and outs of the network, that all still stays in play. We now actually start to put actual economic value behind the transactions associated with the activity on the network, and I think it's going to positively affect platforms like Ethereum and like our chain here in Seattle. So with that, I'm done. And any quick questions? Again, kind of junior college level on staking right now. This is material for us. We've been working for, according to notice on LinkedIn yesterday, Jonathan and I have been working on this project for 1 year and 8 months, and we've gathered about 250,000 shoppers globally, and we've been hustling the last 2 weeks in conjunction with him getting ready for this event. We're going to start to move all of this shopper data down to Ethereum. And this is pretty freaking exciting for us, because this is the moment where the market promise of a shopper being able to cryptographically store, protect, own their data, they get to permission it back to whoever uses it. We're about to do that. And we've been running into the fact and the reality that Ethereum's not ready for this type of volume. And so we only have 250,000 users. And in the real internet world, that's pretty small. In the blockchain world, that's pretty material. And we're hoping and betting on projects like Casper and like our chain to really kind of stand up and materialize the opportunity for us to stake those transactions, because it's necessary for our use case. So with that, any questions or thoughts about staking? Any haters? You? Yeah.
Thank you. Does this, making sure that I understand what you're saying, does this present an opportunity, as I would say, to disintermediate the miners?
I personally think so.
Okay.
Miners see it as a progression, and them moving from owning the network from a validation standpoint, and them using their position, the quantity of tokens that they've collected to become validators. But like I was saying, I think it's going to be I think validating nodes are going to have a reason to validate, like a specific brand or a specific issue that will have, and the person posing the transaction and the validating node can have a participatory relationship in who ends up validating. That's kind of something that's key. Today it's just math that directs who ends up validating. So
aren't you essentially just repeating the process that we went through in the 60s when we invented brands, except you're doing it on the digital network? And in creating brand power, effectively undermining the decentralization attraction of the original idea?
So I wasn't there. I don't know.
I kind of was barely there,
Yeah.
but just imagine, okay?
We're focused on shoppers. So if you visit Every, you hear about Every, we're a bunch of brand people from retail, but we think the real move here is democratically decentralizing shopper data, forcing them to secure it, and then we provide a network that lets them to monetize it.
Like I said, isn't this just branding?
No.
Branding is fundamentally
Yeah.
trusting the name on the label. And now you're trusting the IP address on the transaction.
No, that's super fair. I'm not supposed to say this, but I feel like we're using retail to trick people into understanding their personal value, and but no, let me finish. So our corporate structure is a co-op. We're using public chains. We're booby-trapping this so that we can, as Pomp was saying, we can, as founders, transition away from this level of control. And so we try to start with something that was so ubiquitous that as the foundation / co-op kind of transitions out and shoppers can democratically participate in the governance of all of it, that there would be a future where we're not just trying to use slick language to trick them into a new paradigm to centralize, but that they would ultimately perpetually have economic, legal ownership control over it. So.
And if I can just interject, I mean, I worked for the Oracle Data Cloud, and they're an ad tech, that they play that market. So you're putting the monetization to the buyer, the consumer.
Yep. So
that's powerful.
I think,
and that's where it needs to be.
I think so.
Because it's our insight, it's our data, it's what we want, and we benefit from it, not the ad tech platforms.
You should leave the evil empire and join forces.
Oh, I don't work for them.
Oh, not anymore. Okay. Okay. So one more.
Hi, just about proof of stake. I mean, I've been studying this space for the past couple of months, and I think it's really important to say that when you look at it from a technology perspective, it's one thing, but we're actually creating a hybrid between something that is government-like and something that is business-like. Mm-hmm. And on the government-like side, we don't have enough participation from our community, bringing in political scientists, economists, to actually try to look at, okay, what are the simulations of the future, because we're talking about balancing between different, the staking is trying to balance between different powers in the system, and if it's not balanced well, it's like a political system that's debased.
Yeah, governance is where I probably think we're most ill-equipped, to be super transparent. In thinking through like the monetary policies for human value is plays intimately into that. So back to the co-op model, it's not a cop-out, but it's a deferment to the crowd, so that we can allow for the governance of the people, who we can compensate and motivate to actually participate in bringing those concepts and ideas in life, so that they can self-govern and direct themselves. So we obviously need to have some key tenets in place, but I don't want to play God around how these 250,000 shoppers, which is just over the last 2 months, how these people start to control how they monetize and extract value themselves for their data. So our whole governance model is compensating, paying these people well to bring concepts and ideas globally. We're going to have committees and subcommittees and people that are starting to hopefully think about how we can steward and protect this for them, because internally we're very ill-equipped to architect that for them.
Great. Well, everybody, please give John a round
Thank
of
you.
applause.